Everybody. I just made the second COVID-19 quarantine video to help with literature and language and literature and offer some tips, and it was a complete failure. I decided that I wanted to make 2-minute videos, and I went for 16 minutes. Those of you who know me, probably understand. So I'm going to try to make this one a little shorter, but I'm talking too much already. Here's what I'm going to do in these videos. I'm going to try to give you a story from something on the inside of IB, from making up exams, from making up workshops, and some things that I've seen, because then it'll give you a slightly different perspective from the one you might often get. And I'm also going to try to recommend books, because here's another secret. I'm going to recommend new authors from the prescribed reading list for just things that you might be interested in, because guess what? I was actually the editor of the prescribed reading list for the new curriculum. I did years of research and reading and interviewing and looking at anthologies and college courses, and so I'll try to give you some insight I have from doing that process. And if you want to complain about some authors that came off, or congratulate me for authors that went on, okay, yeah, you can do that in the comments too. But I was looking for new things, new voices, and I think we found some. So now I've wasted so much time. I'm going to talk about the biggest problem I see in papers, in any paper, in an oral, in paper 1, in paper 2, in written task 2 especially, or paper 2 essay, and that is a lack of authenticity and a lack of you and your personal reaction to the works at hand. I've often said that my students don't have a writing problem, they have a thinking problem. What does that mean? It means I think if you have something to say, you can find a way to organize it. Most people go beginning, middle, end, have something to say. If you know how to fix motorcycles, if you needed to tell me how to fix my motorcycle, you would say, here's what you have to do. First of all, do this. Then you do, you know how to organize an argument. The problem is, if you don't know something, if you don't have something to say, it's hard to say it. So the biggest problem is you have to read the works. You have to read them so that you have something to say about them. And then you have to trust yourself to say something about them. You're not trying to just repeat what your teacher says. You're not trying to just repeat what you read on the internet. You're not trying to impress an examiner. Like, oh, I have to sound smart, so I will put a 3-part thesis together that shows how the setting, imagery, and words help to show the theme of it's all complicated and I don't know what you're talking about. So I see two problems. I see some people who seem to have nothing to say and just meander and struggle and try to take snippets of things that they've memorized or grabbed or barely remembered and throw them into the essay. And I'm like, well, is this answering the question? What book did you read? Did you like it? Did you think anything about it? Or the other one, which just tells me maybe it's even pretty well written, but super organized, and it just tells me the standard facts that everybody seems to know: Blanche and her light, the lampshade, and the green light on Gatsby's dock. And it's like, yeah, I get it, but is this you? Did you read it? You know, it might do okay, but I want to see something authentic. So I'm looking for you to tell me what you think about the books that you read. I'm looking for you to just tell me in your own voice, not worry so much about the language, not worry so much about getting things right, so much as telling me what you think. That's why all those tricks about how to get a 7 without reading a book are actually going backwards. If you read the works, you've gone a long, long way to doing well on these assessments. If you read the works and trust in yourself, you've really taken another step. I say ridiculous things all the time. It's easy to say something ridiculous, but it's also easy to be shy, to sit in class and not say anything. But I think you just have to practice. Number 1, read. Number 2, then offer opinions whenever you get the chance, whether it's in a small group. That's why we put you in groups in class, so you have a chance to speak, so you have a chance to share your ideas and practice sharing those ideas. But if you trust in yourself a little bit, it'll come through. And here's the quick story. I'm going to make this go long. But our chief examiner was a great guy, and we used to meet for standardization in Cardiff. And we'd be at a table, just 3 of us, deciding what the marks are for the papers coming up. This is what good looks like. This is what adequate looks like. This is what a bad essay is. Just putting things. We needed his advice on language on a paper. And we said, hey, Jonathan, come on in here and just tell us, what do you think about the language in this paper? Is it a 3? Is it a 2? It's not very good. Tell us what you think based on being in the room with paper 1, or tell us what you think about the other time zone. And he started reading it, and he said, wow, oh, interesting. This is really an interesting paper. And we're like, stop, stop, stop. Just tell us about the language. But he couldn't stop. He's like, okay, yeah, the language, it's hard to understand. It's kind of confusing. There are so many grammatical mistakes. It's really tough to read. I can barely understand parts of it. He's like, but this is a diamond in the rough. He's like, this candidate, this student is, this student read these books. This student cares about these books. And this student is really saying some interesting things about this question. That it seems like they've really thought about this question. So the student ended up getting a pretty good grade. The language score was low, I'll have to admit. And the organization wasn't bad. But what came through in that paper was an authentic response to the work and an authentic response to the question at hand. It was someone who read and cared about what they read, and that came through. This student didn't have to worry about faking reading the book. This student didn't have to worry too much about what the things that had been memorized, because this student had internalized a lot about the book. Grab some things, your teacher says. Grab things from resources for sure. Go ahead. The more you do, the better. But the most basic thing is reading that work and trusting your own response to it. Now, next thing is I want to recommend something new from the PRL, since I spent those 3 years looking at syllabi and reviews and reading works. And one of the authors I read and really enjoyed was Jessamine Ward. I wrote it down on a piece of paper, so if you want to pause it and look at it later, Jessamine Ward. And her first book that sort of came to some acclaim was Salvage the Bones. And it came to my head now because it's a book about tragedy. It's a book about Hurricane Katrina, and it's a book about the disaster there in the south of the United States. But it's a book about rebirth and recovery as well. Maybe there's some hope as well. It's a beautifully written book. It's interesting. And by the way, beautifully written. I hate that. What does that even mean? But it's a book that's engaging, that I enjoyed, that I read. So I think it's maybe worth reading in a time like this. It's certainly not uplifting. So maybe for the next thing, I'll think of something more uplifting to read. But here's why I like new books. And it relates to what I was saying before, is that they give you a chance to be authentic. Okay, if you're reading The Great Gatsby, and The Great Gatsby is a great book, and I know a lot of schools study it, and I've taught it before, but you end up getting handcuffed. Like, oh no, I have to talk about the American dream. Oh no, I have to talk about the unreliable narrator. Oh no, I have to talk about the green light. Oh no, I can't remember what color Gatsby's car was. All those things, I'm not sure how much they matter. Sometimes they do. But what really matters is you reading the book and thinking about it. So if you grab a book like Jessamine Ward's Salvage the Bones, there maybe aren't spark notes for it yet. Maybe there are by now. Maybe there aren't like resources. Oh, I hate resources. But maybe there aren't resources. So you're reading it and thinking about it on your own, and maybe engaging with it with your teacher in discussions about it that aren't weighted down by expectations. So I enjoy reading new books, and I enjoy a balance for sure. But it would be a good one for you to read just for your own personal edification during this time. So Jessamine Ward, check her out. Every one of these I'm going to give you a little bit of a story and a little bit of piece of advice and something from the book list. The next one is very practical. I've been asked to talk about the new individual oral for those of you who are in DP1. So I'm going to give you some advice, and I'm going to tell you from my personal perspective, because I'm going to tell you about the day that we made up the assessment. I remember there were 4 of us sitting there, 2 of us talking about, in particular, how do we create a new oral? What's it going to look like? And we came up with it. I actually didn't, she did, but you know, I was there, so I can talk about it. And I'll tell you about that, and it might give you some insight into what we're hopefully trying to get from the individual oral. So that's coming next. That'll come tomorrow. I know this one wasn't super practical, but really it's about trusting in yourself, trusting your reading, and that'll come through. Thanks.